course, it's the first thing the radio picked up. The mic picked up.
Comes Andy now.
Get started anyways.
I'd call to order this meeting of the Oconee County Planning Commission this Monday, August 6th, 6 p.m. Our first order of business is invocation county chaplains. Since he is absent tonight, I would ask Ms. McPhail if she will lead us in prayer.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Pray with me if you would. Our Father, as we go about business of the county, please guide us and help us to see all sides for all of the citizens of the county and to do the work in the best way that we possibly can to serve people as fairly and honestly as we can. In your Son's name. Good. Thank you.
Amen. Okay.
Say good night.
Mike, listen, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. All right, you have before you the minutes of the July 16th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So move.
Second?
I'll second.
Do we have any corrections or? Okay, if not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We don't have anyone signed up for the public comment for non-agenda items, so we'll go right into the staff update.
Sure. We got a code enforcement officer, which makes me exceptionally happy because it's no longer my full responsibility. He's just started today, so it'll take him a little while to get his feet underneath him. We are going to set up a little web page and a portal for citizens to be able to submit claims via the web page as well as via mail and email and phone. But right now, it's kind of in the early stages, but I'm glad that we have somebody who's registered with the LLR, like the state's licensing body. And yeah, so that's kind of the big update we have here. I gave you all the building updates last meeting or so I'll give you a few months. We can kind of look at the next set of building updates. So that's what I got.
All right, let's go into the 2020 comprehensive plan. No, let's do the rescheduling for our first meeting in September. Is everyone still good with the 6th, which is the first Thursday?
As far as I know.
Good with it?
Yeah.
Okay. Alex is. Good. Ms. Gwen?
Yes, sir.
All right, so do we just need to tell you to do it, or?
Go ahead and vote on it. It'd probably be for the best. Make a
Need
motion and a vote.
and a motion?
Motion and a vote, yes, sir.
Do I have a motion to change the meeting for September 3rd to September 6th in September?
I'll make a motion to that.
Second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we'll go into the 2020 comprehensive plan and corridor plan. And we have no one signed up for that one either. So, Mr. Adam.
Yes, sir. All right. Let's do this. Okay. So today I had a great meeting with Carol and Cheryl. They're going to be our contact people. Cheryl Matheny, Carol Rhea. Cheryl went to school in Clemson. They both went to school in Clemson, and one was a planner for Seneca a while ago. And so very excited about them. I met with them, Mr. Martin, a few other staff members, and they seem very excited about doing this. Comp plans is what they do, and they really like doing them, so that's always important. We had a brief meeting, and not brief meeting, it's 2 hours. We had a long conversation. So the tentative schedule's up there. August, the rest of this month in September, data gathering, planning, background information is what they're going to be getting. They're looking through, say, the destination of Coney, the traffic studies, other available information. They don't really need us per se for the background work on the population element. They have the U.S. Census to do that. We can be involved if we want to, although it's very minutia oriented. So to me, I'd say let them do the background work that they can do without us, that they require to do by the state. And so that's mostly going to be the population, housing, and the community facilities the staff will do. The planning commission doesn't really have to be involved with that. We can do that from an internal perspective, get Mr. Martin to assign some details like how many landfills do we have, where are the fire stations at, where are the police stations at, so to speak. And then they want to come to us in October, us, the planning commission in October, to kind of give you a rundown of what they have, because the three elements, the two elements, planning, population, and housing, will allow some additional conversations. Say we know that the population's rising. Okay, well, let's say we have more teenagers now than we expected. Well, that should affect the planning process. We're kind of expecting an older population, so they kind of go through and lay a ground level where we can start jumping off from. And then November, December, they're going to be drafting those ordinances, just drafts. And then come to us, and a joint planning commission, county council meeting in January or February is kind of what they're hoping for. To have something to show them, this is the work we're doing, these are kind of jumping off points. And then they can guide the process from there. And in that time frame, we'll have meetings, group meetings, community meetings, things of that nature. And the contract is on your desk somewhere. I put it out there.
So the meetings, when you say stakeholders, that's what you're talking about. They would have meetings within the community, say for people, the teachers, what are they looking for in the schools?
Correct.
Farmers, what are they
Landowners,
looking for in the
teachers,
ag?
builders,
Right.
any of those people. And the language is clear enough, but when I spoke with them, they kind of cleared up some things with the number of meetings they're going to have with us. So when they come to have a joint planning commission council meeting, they're not just going to fly in and fly out on our nickel. They're going to come set up camp here for the day or the 2 days beforehand and have a group of meetings, whether here or elsewhere. It's not just they show up here for 10 minutes and collect a big check. They're going to be here to be here.
Will they be inviting groups, whether it be an agriculture group or a Destination Oconee group or some of these other groups to come in for some of those meetings?
So since they know, I mean, they personally know because they're from around this general area, they're going to give us some broad stakeholder groups. They say, like, let's look at agriculture, let's look at vets, let's look at teachers, things like that. And they're going to have us being the staff. And I'll come to you all because you all have groups that you know of and are involved with to get that information to invite them. So I'll be doing the invites based upon information we all gather based upon their suggestions as to the groups. And of course, any other ones we want to.
And the meetings are all going to be held here?
I'm sorry, sir?
The meetings are going to be held here?
I would imagine ones with when we invite all to here, at least initially, at least the first one or two, would probably make sense to have them here, just as a matter of we know where everything is, and if there's things I don't know that we need to bring, I don't want to have to send someone driving across the county for, an extra ream of paper kind of thing. But no, we'll definitely go out into the communities. But I imagine probably the first one or the first two we'll have here, just so we can get a level of comfort with it. And they definitely want you all to be involved on the days of the meetings, not just the planning commission meetings, but the meetings that we have with stakeholder groups. If you can be involved, they definitely want the planning commission involved individually or as a whole, as well, council as well.
Have they, I'm assuming they will at some point put together some sort of public service announcements that we can start talking about that.
Correct. They're going to put together the advertising for it. I mean, I still have to put it out, but they're going to get together the words we need. They're doing surveys as well. I think maybe you asked about surveys, or they have surveys that they have available. Then they're going to hand it to me, and I'll get it out into the world.
Okay.
Cool.
So that's the tentative schedule. Two questions. One is that we could do a steering committee if we'd like to. That means we'd break down the planning commission, maybe one or two planning commissioners and a handful of, citizen group if we want to, and they would lead the planning process, or the comprehensive plan process, and maybe report back to the planning commission as a whole. That would take a minute to set up, although we do have the time to do that. Or do we just have the planning commission because it is your baby at the end of the day. You all have to vote on it before it gets sent up to council, regardless of whether it's a steering committee or not. So I guess the first question is, would you all prefer that you all handle the comp plan, which is I personally like, or do we go with a steering committee where we set up a second group? That's my question to y'all.
I would like for us to do it.
I think the planning commission should do it. I mean, we're gonna get input from the public anyway, all the people we know and talk with, so I think we can do a fairly good job at it.
Is it within the budget for all the money that you pay us? Could we have a couple of extra meetings if we needed to, or would that be something that we would be asked to donate time, which is fine with me, if we can sit and meet with them about, if they, say they come with a rough draft and would like us to have a special meeting to sit and talk about it?
So yeah, they're gonna come up with, every month they're gonna give an update. So whether they come up here or not, or just send it to me and I'll give you all the update. Each element, all 10 elements that come through, we'll get them one at a time. And any feedback from that, we can give them directly. So we may wanna, on those nights, we may wanna roundtable it. Might be a little easier, or if you all wanna sit up here and do it, and dig through it, because some of the elements are like the population element, like it's gonna change, the numbers are gonna change, but by and large, like the population element as it sits today is probably gonna read not too dissimilar from what it reads today. It'll probably read a little more clear, a little more picture oriented, but it'll still have everything that the state enabling legislation requires to have, so it may have a bit of drudgery to it. But other ones, I mean, the goals element, really, when we get down to that portion, which will be later on in the process after we gather all the data, that'll be that first, I think it's the first 15 pages in this document. I mean, that's the plan.
That's the thing.
So,
I was gonna say, we could even almost cover two if it was the drudgery stuff
right.
on one night, and then set aside almost a whole meeting maybe to go over something as important as the goals.
I'm just looking forward to the ideas and
The
site direction
Yeah.
that the
me too.
county wants to go. And I'm looking forward to seeing if people will get involved in that process.
I certainly hope so. I can definitely think of the agricultural community, just, I feel they're pretty activated. I feel pretty certain that they'll show up to meetings. I know that there are certain groups that show up to the normal council meetings. People usually don't show up for government, which is unfortunate, but I'm gonna do the best I can to reach out, especially to, all of you have your groups that you talk with. I know you baseball and sports. I know you do realtors, vets, farm people, recycling, whatever it is you all do, to hopefully we can bring to the table. So we can advertise it. WGOG wants to do a running list of, running like, hey, the comp plan's going on. So they're very engaged, and they contacted me about that. So, we just need people to get out. It's like voting. We'll get 18% of the population show up. So,
You need to go on coffee time.
sorry?
You need to go on coffee time
Coffee time. I don't know what that is.
on the radio station.
Oh, me on coffee time?
I mean, they sit and talk about what's going on in the community.
Oh, definitely. If you'd like to do that, certainly I'll set that up for you. You're welcome to.
No, I'm saying you need to go on coffee time.
Sorry, I don't hear what your microphone's breaking up.
So there's no need, we don't have a vote or anything we need to take on this.
If there, we can take a vote on it, certainly. I think the conversation kind of speaks for itself. I mean,
I don't think a vote's needed. We're getting started, and we've
Sure.
already took several votes on getting started, so,
Good. So the next question I have on there was a farm, and we were talking about this. So right now, like Mrs. McVell, your farm is probably taxed ag or agricultural, I'm guessing?
The property is.
The properties, yes, the property's taxed agricultural. So let's say you have 50 acres that's being taxed ag, and you have a house on it. So the tax assessor takes an acre out of the tax roll. So you're paying your residential on 1 acre, your 49 acres of pasture land. There's tons and tons, probably thousands of properties in this county that are agriculturally taxed that I would argue probably aren't agriculture as we see them, and aren't really but like the planning process to plan for, let's say, 1,000 properties that are ag, when only actually 800 are farms. Those other 200 just, sit in woods. So we have to kind of figure out how to look at that through the assessor's data. This isn't like a policy thing. This is changing no one's taxes. This is nothing of that nature. This is purely for us looking forward. This is just like population data. So we have to kind of figure out when a farm is a farm, because we'll look at the tax data, and that doesn't really tell us much. So if we saw 5 acres that's taxed ag, and one of it is a house, is that a farm? Is it 9 acres? Is it 12 acres? I feel it's probably a good question for the ag board to tackle, especially with our farm and rancher listening session. It's just kind of more of a meta idea for us to be able to plan for farms. We have bigger farms or smaller farms. So, and that was a question we have to look at. So if we don't answer the question in a public realm, we'll come up with from a staff point of view of like, how do we plan for this? And once again, will not affect the price of tea in China as far as taxes or anything like that, or land value, or how anything's assessed. It's just how we're looking at it from a planning perspective. So if you all don't have any issue with it, I'll probably bring that up to the Agricultural Advisory Board, because it kind of feels like that's in their wheelhouse.
Do we have a current definition of a farm?
Okay, no, but from a planning to plan for, from an ag use, yes. From if you go to the tax office, they have a very good definition of a farm, of what agriculture is, not necessarily farm. This would be more for how we're going to account for planning. Let's say we think we have this big agricultural presence in the county, but we really only have 12 farms. So looking at the tax assessor data isn't necessarily the most clean way of figuring out what a farm's a farm. And that's kind of the thought process on that.
Well, a farm can be different things. I mean, it can be just a tree farm.
That's true. So like, for instance, if I had 15 acres that I've never done anything with, I'd go get a taxed ag because I'm growing
Grass.
stuff, like trees and things like that aren't not necessarily timberland. And that kind of, those people are gonna subdivide that property, pay the 6 years of back taxes, and go put houses on it. So for us to think, oh, maybe that should be all ag reserve or something like that, it doesn't really help anyone. So just trying to see ground truth when agriculture is really farming versus the other way. Just want to kind of, unless you all have any thoughts on that, I was probably gonna bring that to the ag.
I think the ag board would be a
I think that's what we put them on into existence for, so.
Right. I just want to kind of bring that by y'all.
That's
Since
cool.
This is your hat. But yeah, that's what I have so far for the comp plan. They're gonna do some backup materials, things like that. And as soon as all their contracts, because contracts are a complicated animal, apparently. I don't know if any of y'all know that, but we're just waiting on that. So do y'all have any other further questions at the moment?
Okay, then, let's go on to item number 9, which is discussion on clarification of certain code sections bearing on land use and development in specific regards to recreational vehicle parks. I seem to have a couple of people. Miss Debbie, you can speak first, please.
Hello, I'm Debbie Sewell. I was gonna bring you a written thing for you to look at, but my printer had its own mind today, and it wouldn't give me anything, so. But, the main thing I wanna say is that, in anything that we do, I think we should consider our neighbors. And in that vein, I think that with RV parks, and it's mentioned in the part where it talks about doing the site plan sketch or whatever, talks about buffers if available, but I feel like that's something that you might want to think about adding. And I noted in Pickens County, they have a really good thing in their planning for RV parks. They have, and theirs is a lot different from us because they're zoning or whatever, but they had like if it was a 20-foot setback, then they would expect like 10 foot of it to be a buffer and an evergreen buffer of like 4 feet. So in other words, trees, like 4 feet of, so that the adjacent to a residential property. So if you had an RV park that you put in next to a residential area, that you would at least have that green buffer in between you. And I think that's something that maybe you could elaborate on, or maybe have a better, hold on, I mean, like I said, it does mention it. It would be nice to have something in there that was, if nothing else, it was a suggestion. You know, that it would be good for your neighbor if you had that, because it would cut down on, you know, a lot of things. It'd probably help with, you know, everything from safety to security to, and aesthetics. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Debbie. All right, Mr. Tom?
Good evening, y'all. Tom Markovich for the record. I had several things on the RV park. I really think a threshold number for what is considered a park has to be a much, much higher number than 4. And I'll tell you why. It's not unusual in South Carolina for a group of people to get together and rent land for a hunt club. And a lot of times they'll come in and set up during hunting season and use RVs or whatever as a part of, and I'd hate to see a hunt club end up being classified as an RV park, and then all of a sudden we're going to regulate all these different things that they have to do. So I really, truly question that. We talk about some of the zoning applications and how they're going to affect these things, and yet there is nothing about RVs anywhere in our zoning ordinance at all. And so it kind of begs for the definition of what is the zoning use for an RV, and is an RV actually vehicles? They're taxed by for the most part, by the Department of Transportation or Department of Revenue. I don't know, they're in a really kind of a crossover kind of a mechanism. And we also get into some issues there when we start requiring them to, I'm assuming that this is just for the RVs that are going to come to a park and stay for a short period of time, that they have to be licensed and registered or whatever, because you can't get a license for one without it being insured. So there might be some people who've got some RVs, but they may not necessarily want them licensed and insured all the time. It's just something we need to think about. And then parking and maneuvering. And I realize this is all just kind of draft language right now, but it says that you can't use the public right-of-ways or, well, I'm sorry, but I don't know the difference between maneuvering and driving. I mean, how are you going to, and even if we differentiate between maneuvering and driving, at what point does driving become maneuvering? Is it when we decide we're going to pull off somehow or another that's got to get far more definition or something. I don't know. I understand we don't want to be parking RVs on the side of the road. I get that. But, so I think that needs some work. And also kind of going back to the original definition, because it talks about these vehicles being designed for that specific use. And in general, most RVs they all come under the HUD code, not unlike mobile homes. However, again, we have a number of people, mostly hunters, that like to take old school buses and convert them to what might be deemed a recreation vehicle. However, is it a recreation vehicle? Because it wasn't designed for that. It was designed to tote children to school, and then they converted it to a sleeping apparatus. So those are just some questions I've got on that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts on this tonight?
Looking at some of the work that was drafted, looks really good. There were several things that I had a couple of questions on, and I apologize for missing last meeting because we may have covered those. But on page 2 up at the top, it talks about a location of utilities, knowing where these utilities, et cetera. But if we're in the planning stage, if somebody wants to submit an application for approval, DHEC's going to dictate where, say, a septic system is going to go. DHEC won't do that until the property is a property that's recorded. So we're saying here that we need to see where that's going to go when you bring in your application for approval, but DHEC's is going to tell you where it's going to go only after that survey has been platted out as such. So not sure how we work with that language.
So if you were, let's say you were doing your due diligence and you wanted to plan out ahead of time how to do that, yeah, I could probably see that being a hurdle we could jump around. But right now, when I receive a site plan for a house, anything like that, in order to get power, you have to have a septic tank. So if you're gonna run power as per the National Electric Code, you're gonna have a septic tank with it, and you have that septic tank permit.
You have
that
the
has a
permit for that.
little map on it, and so you should be able to, if you drew, or DEC drew your map, or where your septic tank is, should be able to place that on there, at least mark off. where
As
it
a
goes.
proposed, that was why I'd made a note to say description of proposed location, potentially of utilities. Especially if they're going to end up, because those are pre-surveyed lots, if they're gonna end up potentially sectioning those lots off. I mean, there's a high-end RV park in North Carolina just above us that they actually sell those little bitty plats.
Sorry, that was mentioned just before an earlier conversation, yeah.
So in that case, if they're proposing to do this, they wouldn't have those septic application or permits in. So
That
just
seems-
proposed, I think, might be a word that we put in. We may have it under minimum space and size. There's the second sentence, a distance of 10 feet between structures, and then I think it corrects itself in the next sentence, but I wanted to make sure. Again, referencing some of these high-end parks around the country, they'll build a pavilion with an outdoor fireplace, outdoor kitchenette, and truly that RV runs up right next to that, and that becomes their outdoor living space.
Between, so, and or other, so perhaps if you were bringing in I'll clean it up, I see what you're getting at there.
That's what they're selling, is this outdoor living space that the RV pulls up right next to. And I just want to make sure we're not excluding something like that. I mean, with Destination Oconee and us really promoting tourism, I've already got several clients who are wanting to try to put something together like that here.
So what about like 10 feet between RVs,
Or
spaces?
some sort of space. And it looks like you corrected it here with any structure that's an attachment structure would be part of that RV space. I mean, maybe we're talking about RV space and then spaces between that, as opposed to structures itself.
I can see where it's, I'll work on that. It's not 100% clear.
Also, I noticed here that it says the site shall have or only quick disconnects. Just want to make sure that, again, that doesn't stop someone from building some sort of permanent structure with, whether it be ceiling fans in that permanent structure or lighting in that permanent structure, that structure doesn't have to be a quick detach of some sort.
Will this be for let's see, each recreational vehicle area shall be attached to the site. Each recreational be attached to the site. So that's the RV itself shall be attached. If you're gonna put up a building and run power to it, like a pole barn or something to that effect, you would still have to get any necessary permits for that otherwise. So it wouldn't have to run off of and I doubt even you could run a building off that by code, and I'd have to ask.
Yeah, I don't know. It
someone
just
about the
said
electric code.
there shall be no permanently attached additions. And
So-
I would not want those, whether they be a pavilion or a individual living area, to not be able to have electricity. And all of a sudden, we're the only county that prevents something like that.
That'd be permanently attached to the RV.
Okay,
So
Okay.
permanently attached would be you gonna keep it there forever and screw a bunch of
Yep.
a deck to it.
then
like
that
a
makes
mobile home.
sense.
That's the intent of this.
And then on the last part of that particular paragraph, if I'm reading this, and I may be reading it wrong, and so it may just be me, but it looks as though shall be provided, it's talking about safe water and sewer systems provided in all RV parking areas. It's almost saying that there shall be a sewer for each space, and none of our county parks can meet that. So I don't know why we would make an individual park meet that.
So an adequate and safe sewer system approved by the SDAC shall be provided in all RV parking areas. So perhaps all RV parks or parking areas, because we have a pump out station in all of our
And many of
parks.
them do have a pump out station. They just don't have it per site as far as some sort of automatic plug-in.
So we'll say perhaps all RV parking areas or RV parks, or parks as a whole, or parks shall be able to handle that.
And I think that that statement would only be good if we raised this above 4 potentially, because a hunting lodge guy, he's gonna take it back home to pump out. He's not necessarily gonna go to the pump out up at the top of the hill or something of that nature, so.
Well, if they paint them camouflage, we won't ever see them.
I just want to make sure that, because yes, a pump out station, I just want to make sure that we're not asking something of a private that we can't do as a county on our county pump stuff.
Some places handle a pump out situation with a truck. It's not permanent even to the site.
Right. Huh.
Now, does it not, by not saying sewer system, whether it's an individual septic tank or a joint septic group or a pump out, when you say sewer system, is that not kind of covering all the options that makes, you're just basically saying they've got to have a safe way to provide for the elimination of stuff that they don't want left in their RVs?
And this is saying though that it's at each parking space. And the counties just have one, you've got to drive the RV back up to the main parking lot to a pump out facility to dump your gray water or your black water.
So if septic or sewer systems are provided, they must be approved by DHEC. That's if. So if they are there, they have to be DHEC. If they're not there, they don't have to be there. Because that would provide for the pump out trucks.
I think that would be just some wording that makes sure that it gives good clarification as to what's being required. And I think that would be good. On the page 3 of 3 at the top, I realize that it says should rather than shall, but the one-way street thing, I mean, I've seen many parks that are a keyhole of where you've got a two-way street and then it loops around, but all your spaces, back in. So you're coming in on a 2-lane road, it circles around, and in any space, you're able to back into those spaces, if that makes sense. But this is a one-way road, and that wouldn't be a one-way road. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's why I want it should, because there are a lot of different possibilities. I took that advice from the reasons why ours are set up one way. It helps prevent accidents apparently in RV parks. Yes, that's a thing. And it's the once again, it's the should language in there, not shall. And I talked to Roads and Bridges about it, and I kind of asked other areas.
I just think I think if somebody's going to put in an RV park, hopefully they're going to design an RV park where the people can easily back in, however they decide to make that happen, back in or front end to a space. Because people won't come to their park if they can't get their RVs in or out of them.
Yeah, that's hoping for the best in people. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. I can take it out, certainly.
If it's truly a park, I mean, if it's somebody that's parking stuff in their backyard because that's what they're doing, and they're getting them in there and getting them stuck, then this doesn't cover that anyway, because we're talking about parks here. And so a park that you'd have things coming in and out of, they're gonna need to design them in a way that people can get in and out of them.
So speaking on this, and that I didn't bring this up earlier, is that someone called me up earlier, and they're gonna take their 2 poultry houses out of production and put in 200 parking spaces for RVs for Clemson Game Day. It's over off kind of the pier area, the 93 area. And they're like, yeah, we'll just we'll put the investment in for all the post electric hookups and everyone pump out. And that's great, but I'm interested to see how that works out without any sort of, their roadway's already there, their gravel road's already there. It'll be interesting if it doesn't end up on the news, so.
It doesn't end up in the news.
A lot of you parks are one-way roads. You come in this way and your campsites are like this and you back into them, but then you gotta pull, when you wanna leave, you pull all the way around and go this way and go out the gate. Then when you come back in, you do the same thing.
Is the gate a one-way road?
The gate, any park, you got a left side and a right side. Your right side's going out, your left side's coming in. You can't.
Is the pavement disconnected though?
On the one right down here, is it Oconee Point or something?
The one on the lake?
You come down this way, and, it says one way. And the road, then there's another road going this way, and that's going that way. They're all one way. They're not, you can't come in here and go,
Well, if you go to like South Cove, which would be more designed how many of them are, it's a 2-lane road. And yeah, there's a guardhouse that you gotta go around one side or the other, but that's still a 2-lane road until it separates out to some area
I
to
was
turn
gonna say,
back.
The
until
RV
it gets
park,
to the,
yeah.
to the where they park the
Yeah,
camper.
the RV
and then
park
it
portion, that's
becomes-
one way.
Oh,
That's
you
all
got a one-way in and a
They do have a
one-way out.
bridge, which is two-lane road for sure there.
I just don't wanna say that this whole development inside this property line has to be a one-way street.
Doesn't have to be, it just says should be, that's all.
I don't
If
even know that it should
strike
be.
it, I can certainly, take it off.
Well, here in Oconee County, we do have terrain, and that's gonna affect what road system and parking and site arrangement. I don't think we can have one rule about how the streets are gonna be.
Okay.
And in the last part, I just made a note that says, can our county or state parks meet this standard?
Yes.
Because I don't want to grandfather something in and then require something of some new guy that our counties can't even adhere
I
to.
went and double-checked that.
So-
That's where our numbers came from. Because I went and talked to Kyle, and I was like, hey, are we, yeah, you're good.
And the state still has a rule says you can't live in the RVs more than 180 days.
FEMA and HUD, they're temporarily living structures,
They're
because
just-
they fall, as Mr. Markovich pointed out, they fall under the HUD code.
So no matter what they build out there, they can't, it's not a permanent thing. They can
That's
only
a
stay there
state,
180
right,
days, and then they've got to leave for ever how many.
Do they leave or do they move to a different spot?
Or they just go hang out at a friend's house.
Well, if
over
it's
there.
set up, it doesn't say they can't have it set up permanently. It is you can't live in it permanently. So they would have to vacate the premises for X number of time, whatever the state requires, and then come back.
It's hard, it's certainly hard to enforce. I feel it probably gives municipalities, counties, and cities some backing to lean on it if they wanted to prevent that. But once again, we're promoting tourism, RV, people who own $500,000 RVs, yeah, come on. We're not trying to dissuade them from coming, just trying to create some sort of reason for people to make, nice places. And the genesis of coming up with the RV park thing anyways was a direct reaction, as government's good at, from some complaints the county has received regarding RV parks in the most broad sense of the word, in the county that the occupants are causing some issues. Not the RV park itself, but the occupants are causing issues. So that's where the number 4 came from, as far as 4 making a park.
Gotcha. And
That needs to be
I get that. I also think that it's a frustrating thing that we're taking a policing mechanism and trying to turn it into something that scenario isn't even gonna be affected because it's grandfathered in for all technical purposes.
So the grandfather, yes, so, but the parks existing, I didn't put the word grandfather, but the very last, basically the last page is the grandfathering rule. That said, that's something else to talk about is the 10% and number 4. So page 4, number 4 is kind of what the is expansion of. So if that particular area that we're talking about was to increase even by 1, add 1, then it would fall under these regulations. So that's why I looked at 4. And 4 also falls into our road standard that if we were to say, okay, if we want to require RV parks, not we do, but if we wanted to, RV parks follow our road standards, the code would be in sync. That way we wouldn't have, if you have 6 RVs, you have to have a paved road. And if you have 3 houses, or 10 houses, you have to pave road. I'm trying to keep things somewhat synchronized. So if in the future we wanted to say, RV parks are 4, you have to follow the private drive standards, that would be synced throughout the code.
And I realize that we're not at that point now. I don't think that personally is a good idea, only in that from an investment standpoint, somebody building a subdivision with houses where there's a much more solid foundation of development, make them pave a road or make them follow a certain standard. If you've got an RV coming in and out, that's completely temporary, a completely different level of investment, both for the person that's going there and for the person that's designing the place. I don't think the same road standard should necessarily apply. Permanent subdivision, yes, fire and water and all this, accessing that place, if that's why we have that road standard, which to me, I still have opposition. If it's a private road, that's why it's called a private road, is the county's not going to maintain it, is not going to be responsible for it, and is not necessarily going to come get you if something goes wrong. But that's just my 2 cents for the day.
Right, and that's why I didn't put any sort of road standard or anything like that in here, other than saying you should have it, but should is not shall, so I can take that out, the parking maneuverability portion. Speaking to.
Otherwise, I think everything.
Oh, thank you. Speaking to Mr. Markovich's comment that it wasn't noted in the zoning, so this is the zoning matrix, and I've kind of highlighted. Now, it doesn't say recreational vehicle exactly, but it says public, private, and commercial parks and recreation, camping, or social facilities. And then, so this is the zoning matrix. This is chapter 38. Oh, I'm scrolling up the wrong thing, sorry. Let me pull it back down here so I can grab the definition real quick. 38, where's my definitions at? There we go.
And I don't know what the number is, but while he's working on that, we have the Rock the Ranch thing coming up. That's a tourism opportunity. Say that there's 8 people want to go out there and pull up their camper while several other people have popped the tent for this weekend music festival. Okay. Music festivals bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars to different areas of the country. Yeah, we have a small one here, but what if we had a bigger one? What if at some point, 10 years down the road, somebody wants to have a bigger one? And for that one weekend, people are bringing RVs in. Is he trying to make an RV park? No, but does he have to fall under these regulations? Potentially so, if there's going to be 8 people that are doing this for that weekend. I just want to make sure that, I don't want to sit there and put something in place that stops the future development of our county for whatever creative nature we might want to come up with.
That's an excellent point. I hadn't considered that. For some reason, this whole thing just moved.
And there's nothing in this that I read that said that if you're gonna have a weekend festival on your farm, you are setting up an RV park if people can come and,
As long as we don't put some kind of language in there that then all of a sudden precludes that.
I mean, this seems to me like you are saying, I'm providing a place for you to come and park, to go to the lake, or to go to this, or to go to that, for an extended period. And when you leave, I'm gonna expect someone else to pull in, and when they leave, I'm gonna expect someone else to pull in.
Right.
So that, to me, there's nothing in here that affects weekends.
So, no, that, it's good. I mean, I'm glad that.
I'm glad that you thought of it,
talk
but
about-
I,
Just as long as we're thinking under that line. We had the Olympics years and years ago. People were coming up to kayak. North Carolina had the kayaking venue, and it brought all kinds of RVs parking on the side of the road for that 2 weeks of the Olympics. And then it's all gone. But nobody's necessarily going to build an RV park, but they still got to have a place to put them. So every level spot was being used, kind of thing, for that one venue.
Yeah, 100%. I had a big music festival happen in St. Augustine, Florida, where I lived, and in order to get any sort of business license in the city of St. Augustine requires a lot of work. But we had a sign out front of our driveway, parking $50 a day. Not that we made any money, nothing happened, of course. But no, it's 100%. Like I understand the idea of people being able to use their land for what they want to use it for. So speaking to, and we'll definitely look at that. So regarding the zoning perspective where it goes, so this is the definition of campground up there, and it specifically references RVs. And then in the zoning matrix, it does show where you can and cannot have campgrounds. So just using that as a basis for where it goes in the zoning is where I was looking at. So that's our current definition, and the zoning matrix provides for campgrounds where they're permitted or not. So it doesn't, like, if you go to the zoning matrix, you don't find RVs. It's like, I can't do it. You have to dig through it and put it there. So whenever we get ready for this language, we could upgrade the zoning matrix by saying, put the word recreational vehicle specifically in there to make it a little easier to find for the citizens of the county.
Sounds great.
Festivals, it's interesting how like temporary, just trying to figure out for a way to not, every time like we try to figure out like ways to allow more people to do it, I keep trying to figure out ways to abuse it. So, because when I get that, like, oh no, it says this kind of thing.
And unfortunately, it will get abused, and it will heavily get abused during certain kind of event scenarios. At the same time, there are a lot of things that we don't necessarily do in this county right now, but people make a lot of money doing it in various counties from a tourism standpoint. And I just want to make sure, I mean, we're now starting to get an idea of the mountain biking, which is, you know, a gazillion-dollar business up in North Carolina, just north of here, with all the venues that world-class type mountain biking. And we're now saying, why aren't we taking advantage of some of that? And we should have been doing it 15 years ago, but it's good that we are doing it. I just don't want us to sit here today and put the nail in a coffin of something that could be evolved in the future that's not yet here.
So festivals, special events, things of that nature. Yeah, I'll figure out something to temporary usage.
And then the last thing under those site plan requirements on page 1 of 3 there, and it does say shall include the following. Some of that I just wasn't sure about as far as what it actually meant. Location of storage areas. What if they're not providing storage facilities? What if it's just parking spaces like some of our county parks have?
If applicable, gotcha.
Yeah, so maybe the if applicable, and that's actually what I wrote, if applicable. And I don't know what J is.
If
But it
there's a
does say
flood
if
zone.
applicable.
If it's in a floodplain,
Okay,
because our flood ordinance has specific reference to recreational vehicles in the floodplain. So that was the carryover from
Yeah.
that. And so basically you can set it up there as long as it's mobile. So if you're gonna tell me that you are putting an RV in the floodplain, okay, it has to be mobile. You can't throw it up on blocks, or you're not gonna build a shed on it, attached to it. That kind of ancillary building you're talking
Yep.
about, so.
perfect. Those were my only questions.
So try to figure out the hunting club situation, try to figure out the special event situation, a few of the other things you mentioned.
And I'm gonna, just real quickly, I like Andy's comment, just take out the word or maneuvering. Because obviously they don't need to be parking on a public road, sidewalk, or right of way. But obviously if you're gonna, you're gonna have to drive on something to make that back up into a parking area, I would think. So, but they don't need to park there, but they certainly are gonna have to maneuver there to get there. And then I'm also gonna comment that I like Ms. Sewell's comment about a planted buffer if it's next to a residential area. Simply because I can see where that might just make better neighbors. Good fences make good neighbors.
I have to be able to, so residential area works, I know where that came from. And they have residential zoning per se. Residential area is kind of nebulous in our talk, because so much of the county's control-free district. So like if you were next to Lake Residential District, okay, that particular language works. If we want to look at a buffer, let me work at the language for it, if that's something you all like for me to look at. And kind of put together, because the control-free district is kind of this interesting little landmine of ours that we have to word stuff around, so.
And there are a lot of residential neighborhoods that are in control-free districts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
100%.
And to some degree, there's a responsibility of the residential neighborhood not to build clear all the way to the edge of the property line, with the anticipation that the neighbor might do something in the future.
That's
to that
correct.
land.
On the other hand, you maybe have a farmhouse next to an RV park that relies on that RV labor, and you don't want to price them out through it. So let me kind of kick around the buffer thing and figure out the best way we can not cause a whole lot of cost and disharmony as well. Be good neighbors. So let me play with buffer.
Do we have anything else?
Just one thought, and I'm not sure which way I think about this, but if we're gonna have a provision for a temporary RV parking for a festival. Okay, we have a sort of a festival at Clemson every weekend, or every other weekend during football season.
It's true.
Is that gonna be a festival parking situation when it recurs and recurs and recurs? Or is a festival parking situation once or twice a year?
To me, in my head, just knee-jerk reaction, I haven't looked into this any further than any more time to digest it than you all have. It would be if you set up the facilities for an RV park versus, let's say you have 50 acres and you're gonna have a music concert and everyone's just gonna show up, park and leave, and there's no permanent electric hookup, permanent things like that. If you lay out the infrastructure, to me, if you lay out the infrastructure for it, if you put up the posts with power, that to me is an RV park.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think that's a great question. I think if you start developing infrastructure, then you start needing to follow certain guidelines.
Yeah. If you've got
At some
three of
point
your
of-
family in there
at
for the
some
ball
point of
game every
number.
weekend.
Now,
That's one
and to
thing,
what
but-
degree of infrastructure? Again, if it's a hunting lodge where they're not necessarily hooking up lots of stuff, or they're running off a generator, or they do have a power pole because they got a pavilion over there and they're all pulling off of that. I mean, I don't know where this goes, and if we do it by number of units, then means it's now an RV park, or if we do it by the level of infrastructure.
So what if we say it's for and/or has the permanent infrastructure installed, or something to that definition? Permanent RV hookups, so, but then you have people running stuff off houses.
Hunting clubs may have a permanent hookup, because a hunting club is not just, well, we're gonna go down here today and then we're not gonna come back for whenever. They are they're periodically year-round, but we still shouldn't consider them a RV park just because they've got places for their hunters to come in there and hook their RVs up, and they're gonna stay a weekend or so, and then they're gone, and then 3 months later, they come back in for the next season and they hook back up to the same thing. It's a permanent hookup, yes, but it's still a hunting club. It's not an RV park, because Joe Blow can't come off the street and go in there and hook up. You have to be a member of that club.
Can you make it something that has to do with like a rental or a income-based?
You're still paying for the hunting club.
Well, but I'm saying, in other words, if you own the property and you are receiving compensation for parking in this space, then it becomes an RV park, right? I'm thinking.
And you could look at that, land upon which for compensation.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
There you go,
specifically
for compensation.
compensation,
There you go.
paying for the travel trailers or RV to park.
Yeah.
As opposed to a hunting club, you're a member, you're not specifically paying to park your RV there necessarily.
Yeah, you're paying for the use of the whole property.
Yeah.
You happen to be parking, but you're
Maybe
hunting
that's
all
the
over the
difference.
place.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think that's definitely the difference.
All right, I can play that. Plus side, I've never heard this, I haven't had a single complaint about any sort of hunting lodge yet in my time here, so that's good. So they're out there.
And we have several.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I'll definitely look at all these. This is good. This is good stuff.
All right, anything else? If not, we'll move right along to item number 10, which is public hearing on 32-213 subdivision naming. We do have Mr. Tom that would like to speak on this subject before we get into our discussion.
Thank you. I find this kind of interesting because I find that the original paragraph that was in there for naming subdivisions seemed to work rather well in that it didn't try and narrow the scope too much. And now we've got 7 specific little things that begin to narrow it considerably. And the thing that probably bothers me the most about it is that some of these aspects are so subjective, okay? An example, something that might end up being ethnically offensive We live in an area that was settled by the Cherokee. We have a lot of places in this county that are named for Cherokees and for various aspects of the Cherokee people. If somebody decides they want to name a subdivision and they use one of these Cherokee names, have all of a sudden they created an ethnic offense to some, to the Cherokee or to some other group. And I mean, that's just one little thing, but I think when we start, again, it comes down to a real subjective thing, and who's going to determine this? I mean, who's going to decide? I mean, these are things, it's not something that's going to go back to the Zoning Board of Appeals, because this is a subdivision ordinance. If there's a problem with it, it comes back here. Are y'all going to sit down and decide what subdivision names are going to be? And then how we're going to spell things, and whether or not they're homonyms, and whether or not they could be taken to be spelled. I mean, we got people that don't know if it's Tomasi or Tomasi. Come on. I mean,
Or
I'm
Thomasy.
just, right. I mean, so to me, the initial paragraph served the purpose because it didn't narrow the scope too much. Now, we're going to start getting down a path that's just going to take us down another path that's going to take us down another path. Thank you.
Okay. Since this is a public hearing, Ms. Sewell, you've got anything that you would like to say on this particular matter?
I just don't, well, I guess one thing is,
Okay, you
what they were talking about before.
step up to the mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. The only thing that's, to me, that is the repetition of names is the thing that, we were talking about that before. That, to me, should be, and I didn't really study it, so I don't know what but I think and then I have a thing, that's just a personal thing about naming a road or a street after an actual person, because sometimes you regret it. So that's the only thing I have to say, which that's just personal for me, but.
Well, it's bad that we live in a society where if I say something, it might offend someone else, or if Mike says something, it'll offend someone, and everybody wants to sue somebody. And that was probably the purpose of this particular, the way this was put in here, to maybe stop that. But I agree with you, I don't know who's gonna come up with the definition. Well, that's vulgar. It may not be vulgar to you. It may be vulgar to me, but not you. It may be ethnically offensive for you to call it Cherokee Ridge. I may be a Blackfoot, but it's getting to the point where we have to spell out things like this to keep the county out of lawsuits. I mean, I agree with you. The other paragraph looked fine, but sometimes we have to get into specific things to keep the county out from getting sued because somebody got offended. So somebody needs to be taken out behind the woodshed a couple of times. They won't get offended as much. But I'll leave that up to your discretion here, if y'all want to leave that or go back to the original definition that we had in there.
The only thing that I noticed here is that we've talked about it before, that subdivision has two meanings. That every time a piece of land has a line that goes through it, we have created a subdivision of property. And when I get down to C here, when I'm in A, subdivision is talking about subdividing a parcel, and C now talks about, well, now you got to name it. But you can't say parcel A and parcel B of John Doe's farm. You've got to have I'm just concerned, since there are two meanings for subdivisions, most people think a subdivision is something that would be named. But when we go back from a county standpoint, literally when there's a line drawn, it's now a subdivision. And I just want to make sure that we're not creating more confusion.
This doesn't say you have to name them.
Right.
It just says if you're going to name them, you've got to follow these rules.
And these are the same exact standards we have for road naming. Like
Okay.
that, this was copied and pasted, and I changed the word road to subdivision. That exists in our policy and it has for a time, and I believe that policy was adopted through probably the Appalachian Council on Governments, if not, if I'm just take a guess on that. It's a fairly ubiquitous like E911 addressing thing. So for instance, like the hominin part and the duplication, things of that nature. Now, the vulgar, ethnically offensive, or otherwise problematic shall not be approved. There's some, ones that you could definitely kind of jump out at you and say, and there's other ones such as like Lake Cherokee. Like, could that be construed as vulgar or offensive? Sure it could. But that's a place name around here, and if we allow it or we don't allow it, that's going to be a problem on our side. However, putting it out there that we don't allow vulgar names or ethnically names probably seems.
And to answer my part, C, you look at A, you look at B, it says shall, and then you get to C and it doesn't really say. I just wanted to make sure that it doesn't say shall there, but I wanted to make sure that we weren't making an assumption that now you've created a subdivision, now you do need to, what are you gonna name it?
This doesn't read at all to me.
Okay.
Like we're requiring any sort of name to your 2-lot that you're just cutting off a piece to give to your.
That's fine, as long as that's what your meaning is, because when I look at A, B, D, and E, all of those say shall do this, shall do that, and C's the only one that doesn't say shall.
Correct.
Okay, we need to pick either A or B here, correct?
No, so this is what I had prepared for council. You had already voted on this, and
Yeah.
Mike did, and then it was brought to my attention that anything in this particular chapter has to be a public hearing and advertised as such, and it slipped through the cracks. So we actually had this all prepared for council, and then Mr. Root reminded me we hadn't done a hearing. So the reason why it's A and B is to show you the what we deleted and the new language versus just how it looks with the new language. So A and B are exactly the same as far as content goes, as far as the way it's supposed to read. So if you like this and want to vote on this, you can. If you want to kick it back to me to change, you can. Yeah, we're at the vote stage, just like we've done before.
I'm fine with it then, if it's not a.
I'm fine with it. Do you need a motion and a?
Okay.
Yeah, motion and vote,
Okay.
just like everything else.
I'll
Need
make
a-
a motion to
Send
move
it
forward
on
with it
council.
as it is. And Mr. Markovich, not saying I don't understand your limiting thing. I know when we named our road, we were, we came up with names that meant something within our family, and we're told over and over, nope, that's not acceptable. Nope, that's not acceptable. If we had just had a set of guidelines to go by, we might have come up with the one that we have now a lot quicker than we did. So I think, as bad as I hate to tell people what they can and can't do, the guidelines are good. It keeps people from going wacky sometimes.
Critter versus C. Ritter.
Well, I mean, we live on Coyote Lane.
Yeah, you do.
And 250 yards from our driveway is Cody Road. Thank goodness we know the people on Cody Road who often deliver our mail to us because somebody thought Coyote was Cody for whatever,
That's true. And Lisa
Again,
listened
you
to that.
get to those things, but it's very clear if we want to complain, they're not spelled anything at all alike. And so I think guidelines nowadays, because Warrior Creek could be offensive to certain people. But I think it would be something that if we talked about it and then approved it, then maybe nobody would fuss. So,
And then you get things like where Mr. Vassey's addressed on east, south, north, first, second street. Yeah, west, south, first street.
And we get east, north, First Street mail too.
I'm sure it's an incredible thing. But yeah, you and Mrs. Lyles have some of the cool names as far as street names go.
Okay, we have a motion to send it on to council, and then need a second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, I'll close the public hearing on this matter at this time. Do we have any old business? Do we have any new business? Do I hear a motion for adjourn?
so move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies.